friends, and welcome back to my channel. So today I want to do my mid-month wrap-up, so that means all of the things that I read from September the 1st to the 15th. And this is going to be a long one. I have started a new way of keeping track of all of my reviews, so this will be more in-depth than I usually go. That's why I decided to do a mid-month wrap-up, even though I wasn't going to originally. The first book that I read in September was Ace of Spades. I listened to the audiobook for this. It is a YA thriller, mystery thriller situation, and it's about Chiamaka and Devin. And they go to Nadia's Prep, which is an all-white school. They are the only two Black kids at the school. Deals heavily with racism, classism, white privilege, all of that. Essentially what happens is, in the beginning of the book, Chiamaka and Devin get elected as a prefect program, kind of, at their senior year. Everybody is getting these texts from this person called Aces. And Aces is revealing deep, dark secrets about Chiamaka and Devin only. And this kind of starts a spiral. I ended up giving this 4 stars. This is a very slow thriller. I would say it's more of like a horror. So if you're going into it, don't expect it to be like Gossip Girl where it's constant blast and constant drama. This is very slow. This is slowly building. And I personally loved the way that it was set up and the way that the pacing worked, because I think when you're dealing with racism, there's so many different levels of privilege and institutional racism, systemic racism, all of that. So it's like almost like you're peeling back the layers. I also really liked the dynamic between Chiamaka and Devin. I think the expectation would be that they would team up and that they would work together to kind of figure out what's going on, but that's not really what happens. They kind of are dealing with these things separate from each other, and I think that subverts expectations of like a typical horror thriller, but it also subverts the expectations of like the races stick together. So I think that was an interesting take as well. I thought Chiamaka was a badass. She was unapologetically feminine, and she was open about her sexuality, and just everything about her character was fantastic. Now, Chiamaka was a rich family. Her mother was Nigerian and her father was Italian. So you are kind of dealing with it from that lens of a Black girl who has grown up in a wealthier childhood, but also feeling very disconnected from your peers who are also of equal wealth and who you might have grown up with, and just feeling like you don't want to be yourself. Devin is from a poorer community and his sexuality is not open. He is gay and he has a boyfriend in his neighborhood, but his neighborhood deals with a lot of gang violence, and he also knows that his community, in addition to his mother, might not be as open about his sexuality. So he has kind of kept that hidden away. He hasn't really told anybody in his neighborhood that he's gay. And these secrets are slowly starting to come out about the two of them, including Devin's sexuality and pictures and videos of him with a guy, with his ex-boyfriend. And so he's kind of struggling with that. And he also wants to go to Juilliard. So there's a lot of levels to this. And I think, like I said, you're slowly peeling back from the microaggressions to like the systemic racism. I didn't like that it felt a little bit like Chiamaka's consequences to her blast were a little less like high stake, I guess. It definitely felt like Devin had a more developed character and his consequences were a little bit greater. And some other issues that I had were just like little things, like plot lines that were introduced that I never felt like really went anywhere. But overall, it was a fantastic book. I feel I'm kind of getting beyond the age of YA, but when things are just executed so well, it transcends age, right? So next up, I read Sparks Like Stars, and I actually didn't end up rating this, but it is about Satara, whose father is the Afghan president's advisor. This takes place, I want to say, in the 70s. And when a coup happens, her entire family is basically killed in front of her, and she is rescued by a soldier. Then takes her to 2 women called Tilly and Nia, to, like, get her into America. And then you're following that journey from her getting to America, and then when she gets to America 30 years later, she is a surgeon, she's an oncologist, and one of her patients is the soldier that saved her 30 years ago. And this kind of sparks her desire for answers into what happened, and also a little bit of revenge. And this was a beautifully written story, and the beginning portion of it was just brilliant. The coup, the rescue, and like setting up the relationship between the 3 of them, Tilly, her, and Nia, was just great. I liked it. but this kind of fell into the same trap that I feel like a lot of like fiction, historical fiction falls in for me, is if there's any time where it gets slow, I'm immediately not interested because the genre isn't really interesting to me to begin with. So you hit that point where she gets rescued and she comes to America, and then it gets very, very slow. And then you're kind of just living with like her interacting with her coworkers and her partner and all of that. And it just became very boring to me, and so I quickly lost interest. And it's on me because I know that I don't particularly like historical fiction, and so I need to stop kind of picking them up, but I wanted to give it a shot, and it is gorgeous. So if you like historical fiction, I would recommend picking this up because it is beautifully written. So then I read The Good Sister, and this is about Fern and Rose, and it's an alternating point of view story between Rose's diary and Fern's like present point of view when she's an adult. And Fern has some sensory issues, and she works at a library, and their mother is inpatient facility because she had a drug-related stroke and it left her with brain damage. Rose is really the only person that Fern has to lean on. We don't really get a whole lot of background on her like as an adult, but we do know that she has a husband, and in the beginning of the book, Fern finds a bottle of pills of prenatal vitamins in Rose's bag, and when she asks Rose about it, Rose is like, yeah, I wanted to have a kid, but the doctors have basically told me and my husband, like, we can't really have kids. And so then Fern is like, okay, well, I know that I can have kids, so I'm just gonna be her surrogate. But she doesn't actually tell Rose that. She embarks on this adventure to get pregnant, and she meets a stranger at the library that she's working with, and she quickly develops a relationship with that person. Through Rose's diary, you're kind of getting some insight into their childhood, how their mother treated them. She was incredibly neglectful. She had some boyfriends that abused the girls, and we open up the book and then are leading up with the diary entries to a scene of Fern killing a soon-to-be stepbrother, and I ended up giving this 3 stars. I really liked Fern as a character. I don't have any sensory issues on the same like spectrum as Fern does, so I can't speak to for the representation, but of course I would like more neurodiverse characters in my books. But this felt more like a domestic drama than it did a thriller, and I think if you've read Gone Girl, you can kind of assume how the story is gonna go, and I think it was just the most guessable plot of all time, and because it was so guessable, I feel like it should have been leaned in a little bit more. Yeah, 3 stars. I don't have the like very best luck with thrillers, to be honest. Like, they never really exceed my expectations. I think I've had a couple, but most of the time, like these kind of stories, I'm just like, okay, yeah, that was okay. Like, I would never reread it. It's not, you know, anything special, and that's kind of how this one landed for me as well. So then I ended up reading Forever Theirs. This is the second book in the like Theon dynasty or something like that. This is a poly-royalty romance, I guess is the best way to describe it. And it's about Theo, Galen, and Meg. And Theo is a exiled prince, and Meg and Galen is his bodyguard, and Meg is like some random girl. And in the first one, they met her at a bar, and then they spent one night together, and then in this one, she comes back into their lives, basically. And I gave this 2 stars. We spent the majority of the book trying to like figure out the political machinations going on behind the scenes. There is the assumption that the reason that Theo was exiled was that his uncle forged his birth certificate to like say that he was an illegitimate child. So the majority of the book is spent with them trying to like get his throne back. I don't particularly find political anything all of that interesting, because this was like I would say 95% about their political machinations. I didn't really care all that much. Like, I'm reading it for the romance, and the romance was just not there. It didn't even feel like Katie Robert. Like, I don't know when she wrote this in her career, but it didn't even feel like something that I've ever, like anything I've ever read by her before, and this is the lowest I've ever rated one of her books. So then I read Anxious People, and this book actually destroyed me. If you want to see me cry over this book, I have it in a vlog. This is basically about failed bank robbery and then into a hostage situation. I've cat hair everywhere. When the book opens up, you are following Jake and Jim, and they are father and son, and they are the cops that are assigned to this case of this person who has gone into a bank and tried to rob the bank. But the bank was like one of those cashless banks. So they run out of the bank to escape police, and they go into an apartment showing and take those people hostage. So you're following those two, and then you're also following all of the hostages that are in this apartment building. I don't really know how the best way to describe it. Like, if you've read a Fredrik Backman before, you can kind of imagine his writing, very charming, very hilarious, but also very sad, and just very realistic to like how humans interact and how they think and how they live and how they make mistakes. And so everything is kind of intertwining in this story. And I give it 5 stars. It made me absolutely sob. If you've read it, Estelle is my favorite character. She is just, but it's very emotional, very charming. It has like that relatable writing, and it has complex and real people that are responding how you feel like a human would respond, like a real person would respond. And by the end, even the people that you feel like are insufferable and you don't want to see do well, you want them to do well, because you're kind of getting their story in these spurts, and it just feels, you just feel like you're there with them, and like everything hurts, but it's such a good story, and I just highly recommend. There's like no 2 or 1 stars on this at all. It's like, I think there's like a couple, like a percentage of 3 stars. Everything else is like 4 or 5. I will say that this kind of has a slow-ish beginning. I don't personally think it's slow, but it's kind of slow. You're reading manuscripts from the police of like interviews and stuff like that, so it is have like that mixed media aspect. Pick it up. Like, it's so freaking good. Even if you're not a fan of Fredrik Backman and you don't like those like hard-hitting stories, I seriously would recommend picking this up. It's so good. So then I read Bakeries and Bones. This is the prequel novella to this like Westford B&B series or something along those lines. And it was only like 50 pages, but it's basically about this woman who is living in London, and she has a fiance. She's either working or her best friend works at a bakery with her other friend. And in the beginning of the book, she gets a letter from her grandfather's lawyer saying he passed away and he left his bed and breakfast in the English countryside to you, and, you know, come out here and run it. But the novella is setting up for that. Like, she doesn't actually get to the bed and breakfast until the end. But this one is basically her just being like an amateur sleuth for her friend, because he owns a bakery and they're doing some like construction things out front of his bakery, and they're ripping up the cobblestones that are there, and there's a body found. And so she like kind of amateur sleuths her way into finding out like who murdered the person that's under there. And I ended up giving it 3 stars. I probably will continue the series if I can get it for free, but it was super cute. Like, 50 pages, I don't really have any complaints. And I think it's a great place to start if you're trying to get into cozy mystery like me. I got it for free, so I would recommend picking it up if you are interested in cozy mystery. So then I read The Black Fox, and I read this for the Brianna Hale backlist read along that I am hosting, and there is a live show if you're interested in more of my thoughts. But I gave this 4 stars. It's about Zacharias and Lolita. So we open up the book with a scene of the Black Fox, and it's kind of like a Zorro retelling, basically, and he is putting a criminal, like he's tying a pedophile up for like the cops to get him. And then we skip forward like, I don't know how many years, 3 years or something like that, and Zacharias and his wife are eating lunch, and then his wife basically says, my daughter is coming back from boarding school, she's been kicked out, so she's gonna come live with us. And right off the bat, Zacharias is in love with Lolita. He sees her and like his whole world stops, quite literally. And they have a very tumultuous relationship. Zacharias finds that he becomes very angry, very possessive, very controlling over Lolita. So Lolita immediately is angry and doesn't like him. And then on the flip side, we see the Black Fox show up after he hasn't been in this town for quite a while, and he shows up again and starts up a relationship with Lolita. So you have alternating scenes of Lolita and the Black Fox, where he's very soft but also very like sexy and stern, and then Zacharias is very dominating, and so you're seeing like the meshing of the two, and it's all very dramatic. I ended up giving it 4 stars. Very much reminded me of like a telenovela. It's very dramatic, and I think it was like sexy as hell. I do wish that it had been longer. I think if it had been longer, the complaints that I did have about the story, such as like her abrupt change in feelings to Zacharias, would have not felt as abrupt, but it was just dramatic and like sexy as hell, so I highly recommend reading it. So then I listened to the audiobook of Transcendence. Ed is a prehistoric man whose clan has been slaughtered, and so he's been alone for an unknown amount of time, and he stumbles across Beth, who they can't speak the same language, so he calls her Be. The entirety of the story is them hunting and gathering, and him like trying to have sex with her, get her pregnant, and then like them be mated. He thinks they're mates. I gave this 3 stars. I was very underwhelmed by this. I went to Goodreads and it's like 5 stars across the board. Everybody loves it. And I just don't really understand why. I found Ed to be very, very whiny the whole time, very insecure. And the amount of times that he said put a baby in her was extremely annoying. Obviously, you're going to suspend your disbelief with like time traveling and things like that, so that's not even really what bothered me. Like, Ed is what bothered me. The sort of hero that I would want in this scenario. I love soft boys. Cinnamon rolls are like, they're up there. But I think in this setting, I would have preferred more of an alpha, and he just was not that. He was constantly insecure and in his head. And I think another thing that greatly affected my enjoyment was the fact that we aren't ever hearing from Beth. They cannot communicate at all except a few words, and so you're never seeing him in any other point of view but his own. And so because he's so whiny, it just was a whine fest the entire time, and the repetitive language, all of it just made for a not great story. And I don't really understand why, like, it was 5 stars for everybody. I'm really happy for the people that loved it, but it just did not do it for me. It did not meet my expectations. It did not give me what I wanted, and it was just a boring story with an annoying hero. So then the highlight of my month currently is I read The Heir. This is the first book in the Kingmaker series. It is a spin-off of Sophie Lark's Brutal Birthright series. It's a mafia series. I'm sure you've heard of it, but it's basically the Kingmaker's college is the school that like all the mafia kids across the world can go, and this is the first one like in that series. It was so fucking good. Like, oh my god. It's a love triangle situation between Leo, Anna, and Dean. Leo and Anna are like childhood best friends. Their families kind of like run their mafia family together. I have not read past the first book in the Brutal Birthright, so I don't know like the connections between the families. But Dean's family is the rival family to Leo's family. Dean's mother ran away because Leo's family basically burnt and scarred Dean's dad, and basically like destroyed him as a person, like Dean's dad as a person. And so Dean has lost basically everyone. His dad is very neglectful, where Leo and Anna have like fantastic families. Leo is an only child, but they are all very close, and Anna has several siblings. And so Dean, compared to that, has a very cold and neglectful home life. And when they go to this school, Leo and Anna are constantly like, are struggling with their feelings for each other from the very beginning, but Dean immediately sets his sights on Anna. He's immediately infatuated with her, becomes obsessed with her, and thinks she's the best of the best, and he wants her no matter what. And this kind of starts a love triangle. But underneath the romance and the drama, you're set in a school where you're learning how to run a mob or to be an enforcer. There are different kinds of classes. So there is the heirs, which is the heirs to the respective mafia lines, which is what Dean, Leo, and Anna are. There's the spies, the accountants, and the enforcers, and they kind of like, the names are pretty obvious to what each class is. And then, so you're going to this school to learn that. In addition to that, this school has a like competition every year, and it's between all of the grades. The competition has 3 rounds, and so that's kind of the plot of this. And it is so fucking angsty and so good. Like, all 3 characters The minute I read Dean, I knew I was gonna love Dean. He's just the hint of like obsessive bad boy that I love in my stories. There's like a line that he has at the end that just makes my heart break. And honestly, I think Anna is a perfect companion for him. She is the definition of a mob boss. She is the heir to her father's line, and she wants to be a mob boss. She doesn't want to be a mob wife. She wants to run her family, and she's very, very strong, but she's like unapologetically feminine as well. And then Leo is the sunshine character for sure. He is also very spoiled and very arrogant, and he kind of just always wins, and he always gets whatever he wants. And so that is kind of what propels his character. And then of course, like I've said, Dean was very neglected, and so he's like the cold bad boy. The central relationship in this is definitely Anna and Leo, and Dean kind of wiggles his way in, and you know kind of from the start that Dean is not really an option because he has another book. But I think that Dean and Anna would make a beautiful couple, and it just makes me all the more excited for Dean's book because I know his heroine is going to be absolutely perfect. But the thing that I liked about this the most is like the depth of the world is absolutely nutty. When I read The Brutal Birthright, I was just like I liked it. I gave it 4 stars, but I was like, yeah, this is, it's fine. This was insane. The way that Sophie Lark has built up her world and built up her family is insane, and the depth of the characters is nutty. Like all of the character developments that you see just in this one book is fantastic. Leo becomes an entirely different person. There is something that happens to him and Anna 50% of the way through that kind of makes him reevaluate his whole life and how he interacts with people. It's just like nutty. I loved the couple. I loved Dean. I loved this story, and I'm so excited to go on to the rest of the series. I will say the beginning was a little iffy because I didn't know names and stuff, and so you're getting thrown a lot of like family names and like all of that. But if you're familiar with the family and you're familiar with the world, it should not be a problem. Like I jumped into a companion series, so I kind of knew that I was going to be a little bit confused. But 5 stars, like so good. And then I read Birthday Shot by Rilzy Adams. This is an incredibly short novella, and it is about Shay and Sophie. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. And this basically centers around Shay always having a crush on him, on the hero, and on her birthday, they have birthday sex, and then the relationship goes from there. The hero is so sweet and communicative about his feelings. It's incredibly sexy. There's multiple public sex scenes if you are interested in that, and like they're just very mature, and their conflict is external conflicts, which I don't always super love. But the conflict is like her brother, who is his best friend, like how he'll react to them being together. But just so good, so good. If you like Rilzy Adams, this is like peak Rilzy Adams. So good. I loved it a whole lot. And if you are interested in getting into Rilzy Adams, this is a good place to start. I always recommend Go Deep because that's my personal favorite from her, but this is also not a bad choice. I gave it 5 stars. And then the last thing that I finished before the 15th was Bulimi. This is a book that I had on my Hey TBR, and I hadn't heard anybody talking about it, but bully romances are like my shit. So when I saw it, I like was looking for things on KU to read, and so I was like looking up bully romances, and this is one of the things that came up, and I gave it 2 stars. So this, right off the bat, I will tell you the heroine is 16, which you don't get told until 80% of the way through the book, which just feels disgusting to me, honestly. But it's about Crystal and her 4 brothers, and they move with her dad to Nebraska or something like that, or they previously lived in New York. And they moved to this small town in Nebraska or Arkansas, and it's run by the Darling family, that's their last name. And it's Colt, Preston, and Delvin, and it centers around them bullying her, and it was honestly disgusting. Like, I fortunately started hard skimming, like, as soon as I found out that she was 16, which I said is like 85% of the way through, but the bullying in this is awful. Like, I am very much one of those people that, like, I want the bullying to be real, like, I want it to not just be, like, pulling hair, but this is disgusting, like disgusting. Making people eat dog food off the ground, letting people touch the heroine, grab her boobs, like assault her, letting them do that. Like I don't condone that. I don't like it. and it was not redeemable to me. And I don't know how you get from that to loving someone. And there are several times where it's the relationship between Delvin and Crystal, obviously. And there are several times where she's like, oh, I see myself in him. Me personally, because I know there are romances out there where the hero is the one that's assaulting the heroine. I don't know how you get past that. And she's 16. Like, I think that's it. Like, that's all I need to say about why I gave this 2 stars, is that she's 16. Probably should be a 1 star, to be honest. I think I'm gonna drop it down to a 1 star. I'm very hesitant to give 1 stars to indie published authors because, you know, but that she's 16, the bullying is disgusting, and I don't know how you redeem that. So yeah, I'm sad that I left off my half of the month with that book, but please don't read this. Like, I don't recommend it. And if I had known that she was 16 going in, like, I always check, anytime I know that a book is going to be high school, like be around high school, I always try to check to see if their ages are mentioned. And the minute she was like, I'm 16, I was like, no, 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 no. No, no. So yeah, 2 stars, possibly a 1 star. That means that is all of the books that I have to talk about in this video. Comment your thoughts down below on anything that I read. Let me know what you read in the first half of the month. Let me know if you had any 5 stars. I really hope that you did. But other than that, I will catch you guys in my next one. Thanks so much for watching.